We're rolling. Welcome, Josie Leung from Milky Way. How you doing?
Good. Thank you, Peter, for having me here. It's
You
also the
bet.
second day of Lunar New Year, so happy Lunar New Year to the folks who celebrate.
Yeah, happy Chinese New Year to everybody. That's great. Are you based in? I guess where are you based out of?
Hong Kong, actually,
Hong
so it's
Kong.
pretty big over here. Yeah, we
Awesome,
celebrate
awesome.
all festivities. We're very lucky in that sense.
That's fun. I grew up in the Philippines, and whenever there's for every Chinese New Year, it was always a huge party for like a whole month.
Yeah, well, not a
That's
whole
great.
month, but a few days. Yeah, and we
Yeah,
celebrate
I think
Christmas.
Filipinos tend to extend it. That's great. Um, Before we get into Milky Way, I have a lot of really, I think Milky Way is a really interesting protocol.
Thank you.
But before we get into it, I'd love to hear about your background, how you got into crypto, and like what keeps you in crypto, like what is still interesting to you.
Sure. For me personally, well, share that I'm from Hong Kong. So I started my career actually in traditional Web2 side. So I was doing corp dev at LinkedIn. Really love it. It's an amazing company. Was there when Microsoft went through the acquisition with it. But after spending some time there, kind of selling services that killer services that other people have built, I thought it'd be really fun to be on the building side, right? And then so I decided to do the switch from service selling to on the building side. And then I was thinking, okay, what product lines am I passionate about? And this was in 2020. It was still in the bear market. It was before DeFi summer, but I was interested in trading. Just on Binance, just buying Bitcoin and Ethereum. It was fun. And then so my friend who was actually working as a product manager at crypto.com back then was like, "Hey, you want to switch to product? We're hiring." Um, it's also bear market back then, so it's like as long as you're smart, basically, we'll hire you. And then so I was like, okay, I like the product, I like the platform. And I also believe, in bringing sovereign rights and freedom. And so that's why I joined crypto.com. And then I joined there and then joined their product team. And then afterwards, DeFi Summer happened. And then every exchange, just basically scrambled to launch their own layer one chain, right? And was like, oh, we need to tap into the DeFi space. And then so I was looking into it. It's like, okay, how do we launch our own chain? Like, what are the best tech stacks? And that's when I did a deep dive into Tendermint and the consensus system. And then that's when I was like, that's a lot more interesting than Essential Exchange, which is very much, copy paste of TradFi in a way. And so Tendermint was also hiring their first retail product manager. And so that's when I did the switch over to Tendermint and was very lucky. That's where I met my two existing co-founders at Milky Way. And and then afterwards, basically, Celestia launched, and then we decided to launch Milky Way. I can share more about that later, but that's how I joined into the DeFi infrastructure space and been there ever since.
That's great. Now, as a founder of a of a protocol, what are some key learnings you bring with you from your time at crypto.com? I'm sure there's probably a lot of things that you learned along the way that's helped you as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, totally. So I think I'm really lucky in the sense that I've had the kind of rare cross section of being on the product side, like the tech team side, and also having worked as you know, at LinkedIn, where it's completely non-technical as well. So what I've noticed is, there's a lot of kind of tech founder mentality where it's more about like kind of delivering but less about the product market fit per se, or there can be a lot of like kind of business founder mentality where it's a lot of talk and then less of the walk. And then so for me, I think it's really lucky in the sense that I've experienced working at both sides. And so that's why when now that I'm a co-founder, it's a lot better for me to understand that okay, it takes time to you know deliver and ship products as well. It's not just that we can have, constantly changing roadmap. It doesn't work that way, right? It's not like we have a thought process and then the team will deliver. It takes time to, come up with the architecture, work it out with partners, and then build it and then test it and audit it, et cetera, right? And so I'm very familiar in terms of how that part is done. And so it works a lot when I'm talking with, be it external parties or even internally right now, to really know how to craft the roadmap in a more realistic manner per se. And I think that's actually something that we got really nice feedback from with partners as well. It's like, oh, it's really, nice working with you guys in terms of like managing expectations and whatnot.
Yeah. Milky Way seems like a team that focuses on shipping. And
100%.
in the research that I've done, it's you guys have a roadmap, you've shipped, and I really love the look and feel of the site and also the tone and voice in your socials. I'm curious about your time at LinkedIn. In crypto, the primary channel to build awareness is X or Twitter. But it's so noisy that I've often thought, like, I wonder if there are other channels that are not so noisy, not so busy yet. And I've often thought about, well, I wonder how effective LinkedIn could be. And I've done some tests and some experiments. I'm curious from your experience, having worked at LinkedIn, like about that as a potential marketing channel to reach audiences in crypto.
100%. And I'm sure it's being used as well, just for different purposes, right? So the good thing about LinkedIn, it's still the one source of information where people go to if they want to find, for example, the CMO of Binance or the CFO of Binance. It's really hard to find that on Twitter, right? They might be using anonymous handles or whatever, or they might just not be on it because they're not, a social person per se. But most people do have a LinkedIn profile, and regardless of how much information that is. So in terms of companies that want to target specific companies or look for specific people with a certain skill set, for example, Rust developers, etc. That's LinkedIn is still very much their go-to in terms of targeting those audience. However, I do agree that there is still spam on LinkedIn. Like I'm sure we've all received it. It's recruiters sending out messages, or BD people sending out messages left, right, and center. So is there a nicer filtering system? Not provided by LinkedIn yet, but then a lot of people also have their own, like filter bot that have certain bots that help them filter. But one way that I think would be really, really cool and that I personally really want to see is to add a verification layer. Because actually CZ from Binance just tweeted about it. That there are a lot of, I think like his post is something like there are over 7,000 employees claiming to work for Binance on LinkedIn, and only like half of them are real. And so he wishes that there's a way to verify that, from a company's perspective, right? To just verify that this person is real. Because that's also the number one feedback that I received when I was working at LinkedIn back then. Like, it's like, there are all these people, claiming to have graduated from Harvard, Stanford, or that they have worked at, like Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan before. How do I know it's real? And so that's when, they hire that person and then they do the reference check. But it will be really nice if we remove the, reference check and actually bring it forward where it's all verified from stemming from the schools, so educating the education and then educating the companies afterwards to verify. And then afterwards, I think once it's a lot more cleaner data, and then in terms of even, be it the outreach and everything, it will be much better. And it'll be much, I personally would love to see the whole verification done on chain as well. I think that'll be really nice, yeah. But it's less of a tech lift, but more of an education.
Yeah, and that would definitely be a very native Web3 kind of thing to have verification on chain. Let's switch topics to to Milky Way. If you were to describe Milky Way to your mom, how would you do it?
Oh, that's a tough one.
It's really
Um,
hard.
I know, right? Thanks for
Yeah.
putting me on the spot. Makes me think about it now. Okay, let's give this a go. So, to my mom, who knows absolutely nothing about Web3, even with LinkedIn, she struggled because back then I was like, it's just a professional Facebook, and she's still like, but why?
Yeah.
Okay, so this has to be like even like another level down. Okay, so I'll be like, because for Milky Way, for those like the Web3 people, I'll be like, we provide crypto economic security, right? If someone does something right, then we reward them. If someone does something wrong, we slash them. And people people can help provide the security by committing or providing deposits, and then they get the rewards or get slashed, depending on who they stake it to. So that's the high level of how I would explain it to someone who understands Web3. But then obviously that will not work for my mom, so I will try this analogy instead, that I'm seeing for the first time. So, for example, you hire someone to build a house for you, right? And so you need a bunch of workers to, lay the bricks or paint the walls or whatever. And you want to know that that person is like you hired a good person. And so what happens is you find someone to do it, obviously those workers, but then you also don't know whether that worker is good. And so you will have people who will be like, okay, I vote for that person. I'm putting $100 vote, like credibility that this person is going to do their job well. And so I hired 10 workers to go lay the foundation, paint the jobs, right? And then all of these have this reference check of backing. And then I will pay the workers to do their work. And if that worker is doing their job great, like delivering what they say they're going to do, they're going to lay, like 10 bricks a day, they did it. Awesome. So I pay them that day. And then since it's a good reputation, then, the person who referred them will get a cut of it as well. But if the worker just slacked off and didn't just lay, like, for example, 8 bricks instead of 10 bricks, then I'll be like, yo, you didn't do your job. Like, that's not what I thought I'm getting. And so from that, refer, I'm gonna like take a cut out of it to punish them, because that's not what you said that the worker is going to deliver. And so I'm going to just take it out and then probably distribute it to the other workers, or I'm just going to keep it for myself, or something else, or just burn it up in flames because I'm angry. That was not what was guaranteed to me. So yeah, I'm going to explain it to my mom in that sense, that I am just building this kind of marketplace for this kind of sort of security and guarantee that the house will be built on time, in a timely fashion, and with a good quality in place.
No, I think that works. That's a good analogy. I've heard various analogies of, city, like for bridges, for example, or interoperability. There's cities and there's bridges in between, and then each city has services. And I like the example that you just shared of slashing and burning, and those are all really great concepts. And the analogy you shared, I think, would make sense. Now, if you're speaking to a native Web3 person, how would you explain Milky Way and kind of its closest comparables? Maybe not necessarily in the Cosmos ecosystem; it could be in other ecosystems too.
Sure. So if it's a native Web3 person, usually how I start is like, have you heard of EigenLayer? And the answer, honestly, is usually yes. And then I will ask them, it's like, because I've also come to at first I'll be like, oh, EigenLayer, that's cool, that's the easiest way. Then they work on Ethereum, they provide, security for Ethereum-based projects, and then, or Solidity-based projects. And then for us, we do restaking in the modular ecosystem. That's obviously, like in the devil into in the details. But at high level, that's the easiest way to explain it. But what I realized is a lot of people, even though they've heard of the word EigenLayer, or they have interacted with EigenLayer and its LRT platforms like EtherFi, they don't actually know what they do. So if I'm really trying to like explain, then I'll kind of do a deep dive as well, and then be like, so what do you know about Eigen? And then
Mhm.
I kid you not, like most of the like chances it would be like, oh, I get points from it. I got their airdrop. And then I'm like, and like, do you know, like, are you still staking your ETH with them? And then like, or back then when you deposited your ETH with them or Renzo or whatever, do you know what it's doing? And then again, I'll be like, they'll say I get points from it. I've had this conversation so many times, and I realized that they actually like for degen, like not builders. Builders, of course, they know, right? But then for like degens out there who might be building other stuff, or like just like farmers in general, and then they don't know. And so I think that's also another thing that we've kind of realized in terms of um when we were designing the architecture, in terms of like, okay, we need to kind of flip this as well, because users need to know uh, the risk. And also, it makes it a lot more fun for them if they know what they're securing, right? So, this is a gap that we've noticed in terms of all of these projects building on EigenLayer using their security. And then there's a lot of users as well that staked with Eigen and the other LRT platforms. But there's a gap in terms of they don't know who they're securing. And then the projects also don't know who are the users, like basically their early supporters. And that's why for our architect, we're actually flipping the design. The underlying concept is the same in terms of providing the security, but then on the UX level, it's going to be way more fun because we, for the first time, will connect these two parties. And so with that interaction, we think it'll be way more fun for both parties.
And so two questions. I think that's really unique insight that you have with, first you made the assumption, oh, have you heard of EigenLayer? And then people will say, of course. But then do you know like the mechanism design behind it? And most people really they're just farming it for points because they want the airdrop, but they don't really know the risk of staking or restaking or whatever. Um, and I think that's really unique insight that led you to some key product decisions, it sounds like, and or positioning and messaging kind of decisions for Milky Way. What were those conversations like when you learned of those kind of unique insights? And how did you and the team, I guess, come to terms with making changes internally on the Milky Way product?
Sure. So it'll be from a few factors, like because for EigenLayer, like it would be apart from themselves, there are three parties involved, or three buckets of parties. There will be the end user, those providing the Ethereum for security, and obviously the projects that are being secured by Eigen, and also the operators that actually provide the actual services for the projects, right? So we spoke with all three groups and we noticed for the pain points, right? So from the user's perspective, that's what I shared. Like they'd be like, oh, I have no, some of them actually have no idea that they're actually securing anything. Some might have a vague idea, but because the problem is they can't choose who they secure. And so why, like if there's no option, then why would they care, right? And like it's like, oh yeah, someone else chooses for me anyway. So like kind of high level know, who the services are, but then what can I do about it? So
Mhm.
they don't hear it as well, right? And then another thing is in terms of the operators, it's also so sorry. Just to flip it back and describe it from the user's perspective, how it works currently is user deposit their ETH. And then actually they can choose an operator to delegate the ETH to. Um, but from their perspective, all operators are kind of the same, right? Uh, like there's Figment, there's P2P, etc. And like obviously each is their own company, but from an end user perspective, they all just, run infrastructure. And it's not very exciting to choose between the different operators unless you really know them personally, or your custodian, your institutional, etc. Right? But an end user, they won't know. And frankly, they don't really care. And so most of them just either click randomly or just don't even bother to delegate. And then the operator receives this delegation, so they kind of need to do some marketing, do some BD to get more delegation, which is very hard for them as well. And they need to do the DD and research in terms of choosing which, ABS or project that they want to secure. So it's actually quite a lot of work for them to have to both BD the end user and also, decide which services to run. So these are the pain points for them. And then from the project perspective, then they're just, very passively sitting there and then talking to the operators, hey, can you run services for me, etc. And then they have absolutely no insight to all of these early supporters of theirs, who are actually delegating to the overall high level EigenLayer or the LRTs, right? So that is the current flow right now, and we noticed the pain points from all three parties, and we went out there to solve it with our architecture. So how our flow works, it's a lot more fun. It's a lot more dynamic in the sense that the users can actually choose which services they want to secure. So it's a lot more fun for them, right? So they can see that because it's very different projects. So we have a bridging a solution, and so they can be like, oh, I believe in bridging interoperability. That's really going to help, with your adoption. So I want to support that. Or it can be, or you can flip it and be like, but based on previous news, it can be quite prone to hacks. I don't know, so I might not want to secure a bridging solution. So it's completely up to the user, right? But then they can get to choose, and then we will also list out, apart from what the project does, it's also the founders, so they can actually do the DD in terms of, oh, I like these founders. The founder team is amazing. They built that project before it exited, so it should probably do well. That's why I want to support them. And there will also be a description, including the rounds they raised, and then so it can be like, ooh, I love their cap table, XYZ company invested. So I think it's probably going to do well, and that's why I want to support them as well. So it can be whatever reason, or it can just be the most fundamental. It's like, oh, they provide the highest yield, so I'm gonna just support this because
That's
all of the
typically
other.
what
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
typically what it kind of has been.
Yes, exactly. Oh, but we internally think that what if, because all of these projects have no token yet. So some people might be like, I still just want to support all of them to max out my chances, right? So we do have like a select all button basically, and for people to be, okay, I'm just gonna distribute evenly and then see my chances with that. Just go all in, and so yeah, it's gonna be a lot more fun, a lot more dynamic. On the UX level, fundamentally, it's the same. But then yeah, so that's why we're really excited about it. Yeah.
That's great. I mean, on the one hand, you're dealing with kind of a cold start problem. You need enough stake to provide security that will
Correct.
invite projects to build.
100%.
Do you call it AVS on Milky
Yeah.
Way, Active Validated
Well,
System? Okay.
I call it ABS as well. Yeah. We decide to not reinvent the wheels per se,
Hmm.
because when we're speaking with others, it's just that the term comes out, like people building the space, like they're familiar with the terminology. So we
I
decide
think
to
that's
focus
smart.
our effort on
Yeah,
inventing the flow, solving pain points rather than the terminology.
I think that's smart. So, how did you deal with dealing with a two-sided market of getting enough stake to attract the builders to come build on Milky Way? Or was it kind of a simultaneous, BD effort on both ends?
It's definitely simultaneous, but
Yeah,
we're very lucky and blessed in the sense that we're building in the modular ecosystem, and it's very I won't say tight knit, but it's a very caring and loving ecosystem in that sense, where everyone's very welcoming. And so if there are new builders coming in, we usually help each other out. And it's not just from a BD perspective, right? It's just, kind of founders talking to each other and just helping out on stuff, be it from like, company registration. At the beginning, it's like, oh, how do you set your entity up, etc., to like, kind of like fundraising 101, because a lot of people haven't done it before, including ourselves. Like when we started, we asked around a lot, and then it's like very simple question: what goes in a fundraising deck, for example? And then so like there'd be like, we did it, and then someone like we ask people who've done it before, and then it will be like people coming in afterwards. So it's a very friendly ecosystem where we help each other out, and so that in terms of like BDing for security, so everyone kind of knows what each other's building, and then like if there's any synergy, it's pretty early on, and we will have known each other from other conversations probably, and then it will be like, oh, you're actually building this or pivoted to this, and then we can actually collab on this front and then help you launch faster. Because the whole thing for projects is that like why restaking exists, like if I'm speaking to a founder, is they will probably be building something that requires security, right? Be it a bridge, be it an Oracle, be it a DeFi platform. And then for them, it's like they don't want to BD for that, TBL themselves. And then so we have one TBL that they can share use. So for me, I'll be like, hey, you focus on building your product, right? Be it money market, be it a bridge, be it an Oracle, and then we will handle the security for you until because it's always rental, right? Where we never expect them to basically use it forever, because the idea is that they're going to launch their token, and then it's going to amass enough security themselves that they can remove it. And that's also another cool design that we have, because a lot of projects are scared of just doing a cold cut switch, right? It's like, okay, I rent security from say Ethereum or Bitcoin, and then it like but then my token launches and then it goes well, and then it's a cold switch, and then so it's like, oh, but that's a lot of pressure. What if something goes like there's a black swan event or whatever, right? And then so we have a mechanism where they can basically choose the percentage. It's like, okay, I want to be secured by ETHIA or USDC 100% in the beginning, and then my token launches and it's a gradual switch, and then they can switch back as well. So that's something that found it gives a lot of peace of mind for the founders as well. So yeah, it's we're really blessed in the sense that we're building in this space, and then everyone has a very collaborative mentality moving forward. It's really about like not fighting over the same pie, but really growing the pie. Like that's how we see it over here. Yeah.
Two things. I think your insight to create that feature, that to be able to switch off, is scary for a lot of these projects and founders. And so to be able to slowly reduce the percentage or the reliance on the security of Milky Way, and then more on theirs, and then a toggle between the percentage, I think is really smart. What how did you guys come up with that feature in your product?
Talking to other projects, like everything
Yeah.
we didn't just fabricate from our mind. Everything is from talking to the upcoming projects, knowing what they're building, what will they want. So we know that everything we're building right now, it's not fixed in stone. It's based on the feedback of existing market demand, and that changes all the time, right? And then so everything that we build is has that flexibility in mind, that it's like kind of like plug and play, that it has to be easily switched out and replaceable. And so it came from projects who have research into other restaking products, or just thinking about their token, because I mean most projects are thinking about their own token, right?
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, how do I so they really like our or we designed the approach to solve their needs, right? It's like, how do I identify early supporters? Because these early supporters who support them before their token has launched, then they can target them, and then they can even have a public sale or whatever. And then it's like, hey, early supporters, my token is launching, will you want to like buy in? Or they can just choose to airdrop them to reward them if they don't need a public sale. But it's just growing that community for them. That's how they see our platform. So obviously the toggle and the switch, that's also another great way for them to gradually ease in and introduce their token, right? So I didn't come up with a term, but then like a lot of projects, when I explained that, they'd be like, oh, so it's like a launch pad. And I'm like, well, yeah, in a way, but we're not doing like, the central exchange, like, no, that's completely different, right? But then in terms of, community side, then sure, yes.
That makes sense. Now, you guys have made a big bet on the modular ecosystem. And for those that are not familiar, that's essentially the Cosmos ecosystem, and it's been kind of rebranded to the modular ecosystem, which is, I think, a pretty recent thing since Celestia, I believe.
Yes.
I remember going to a Cosmos event back in 2000. When was it? 2019, I think, in San Francisco. And I remember how cool it was. And there was a ton of Ethereum people there. I was there with another project that I was working with, Oasis. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. And I just remember how many developers were there, and how focused they were on building, which was, and you get the same feeling in the Ethereum community too, but it's kind of changed a lot since then. There's been a lot more politics, and I think there's some level of politics in the Cosmos ecosystem too, but I feel like there's kind of a recent emergence of like the modular ecosystem, and then modular versus monolithic, which is kind of this a really interesting interplay and narrative that has come up. What made you guys make a big bet on the modular ecosystem versus and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe Milky Way is the first liquid staking protocol on Cosmos, right? So the
Not on
first
Cosmos, for Celestia.
for Celestia, got it. Sorry. And the first in any category is like, you want to be the first in any category. So great job there. But what made you make a big bet on that?
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Good question. Also made me realize that I should have probably introduced in terms of how MilkyWay started in the beginning. But yeah, so I think I mentioned that I met my other two co-founders at Tendermint, which is the founding company of Cosmos. So this was in 2021. And actually, Tendermint has a venture arm that invested in a Celestia seed round way back 4 or 5 years ago when they did the seed round. And so we've always known about them and, been supporters of them, right? Because it's really cool in terms of how they're providing DA to make, roll-up costs go way down. So essentially for, people who might not know, like for roll-ups, like currently the average like transaction fee is like $0.11 dollars. And it's okay if it's like, just a, swap or whatever. But then for more interactive projects, for example, your gambling site, your gaming site, and then you need to make a move or something, right? And then if you like walk across or like just do something, and then imagine you need to pay like $0.1 per action, then that's a lot of money. And then so for them, like it's to really drastically bring that cost down, so that it enables more use cases that can be built, right? So that's why like we've always been supporters of it. And then when Celestia was launching in 2023, end of 2023, my co-founders being the tech guys, one's a blockchain engineer, one's a full stack engineer. So they were talking with like, other Cosmos OGs in terms of Celestia's mining launching, cool. It was still bear market back then. And then they looked into the code base first. And then we're like, wait a second. So there are 3 other liquid staking providers in Cosmos then. And still now. And then they were like, wait a second, Celestia's Genesis file is missing this module that enables existing liquid staking providers to support them, essentially. And then so they talked to Celestia team and was like, yo, you guys missed this. You need to add this or else it won't work. And then Celestia was like, oh, but we're gearing up for mainnet launch. And if anything that's not needed for DA, we're not going to add it. And so they were like, well, Celestia's going to be a big chain, and then all big proof of stake chains need liquid staking, and so let's build it. And then so basically rounded up the old gang with bear markets, or like, sure, why not? Just sit at home for 2 months and then give it a shot. And then if it doesn't work, then we can, I'll job hunt as a team, build something else. But that'll be fun, right? Because, I'm product and then one's blockchain, one's full stack. And then so we kind of have it in terms of, and then we've launched products before together. And then so we were like, architecture, okay, we do our own, like, it's like back to working together again. And then okay, so it's like hit the ground running, just full speed ahead. And then so we just sat at home, worked, and we launched. And then we were incredibly lucky in the sense that market turned just at the same time. And then I actually had a friend who pinged me. He's, God bless his soul, he was an ex-colleague at LinkedIn, and then he went to FTX afterwards. And then he got absolutely destroyed, and then like his soul got crushed. And he hasn't done any DeFi activities basically for the entire bear market cycle. And then he was like, "Your platform was the first platform that I used since I got back into the trenches." And then I was looking into he was reading the blogs and articles, and he was like, he saw my name, and then he was like, "Hmm?" And then he looked it up. He was like, "Oh shit, it's actually you." That's why he messaged me. And then so like we captured that that wave of like people who start using stuff again because the market was picking up, and then there weren't that many products launching, and then so we were very lucky in the sense that because we decided to build in the bear, right? And then so that's when people started building again, but we have just launched. And then we also raised our seed round, from Polychain's Finance Labs at the same time. And then we spent the last year basically building up the restaking platform. So that was really fun. And then since we started in the modular space, and then so we're still building in the modular space, but the whole point of the modular ecosystem is to build whatever, right? And so yes, we're starting in Web3, but then we've always been like our long-term vision is to basically bring crypto economic security to the real world as well. So I'm very like kind of spoken with other friends or acquaintances who are not in our industry at all, right? And then so they run fintech companies, supply chains, like these sort of stuff. And I was like, hey, what do you think of using blockchain tech? Because you always share your pain points of stuff not being secured, like there's just no way for accountability, etc. And they're like, oh, that'd be really interesting, but they just have no idea in terms of how to even get started, right? And so that is our long-term vision. And sitting in the modular space really helps achieve that vision as well, because it's really about building whatever. It's not just about Cosmos, but then it's about facilitation for the broader world as well.
I appreciate you sharing your long-term vision. What's the plan to get there? I mean, it feels like it's a lot of work right now just within the Celestia ecosystem.
Yes.
But to go beyond that, even within Web3, first, you're probably thinking about interoperability and getting stake from other ecosystems. I'm guessing. Would love your answer on that. And then to go beyond Web3 back into Web2. I guess what are your plans there?
Sure. So in terms of the stake, I do think it's a balance, because it's like you have the supply that secures the demand, right? And yes, the supply is important, but I also feel like the demand is important. And back to what I said in terms of we're all firm believers of growing the pie together rather than fighting over the same pie per se, right? And so we do have the option, and a lot of people have also told me, right? Why don't you, enable the deposit for Ether, for Bitcoin, etc. So it's always an option on the table. I'm not saying that we won't do it, but at the same time, we're also really good friends with the folks over at EigenLayer, Babylon as well. And so for them, we've always been in discussion in terms of partnerships in the future, because they have their supply on both sides and we have our supply, right? So if we enable it, technically it's very easy and we can have it done tomorrow. But then at the same time, it's like then we're fighting over, supply in that sense, and TVL. And then so it's a more collaborative thing that we envision in terms of, how the forces can be joined together to achieve that interoperable. Because end users, like, honestly, it'd be amazing, right? If like I don't have to like, bridge assets and then use multiple wallets, like, like having that, chain agnostic user feel is really important. And same for the builders, right? Right now, like they need to choose like, oh, should I go EVM? Should I go MoveVM? Should I go SVM? Should I deploy my own chain, etc., etc.? And then so
There's
it'll
a
be
lot of
really nice.
options.
Yes, I know. And then
Yeah.
like and that's what people need to choose. Like we went through that ourselves as well, right? And then so in terms of like interoperable, like merging, so that's how we see things as well. And in terms of going for kind of the real world use cases, then I think it's really the industry coming together, and really going out there. It's going to be a lot more on the education side of bringing awareness that it's not just about meme coin trading. but there are a lot more use cases as well. I mean, meme
Yeah.
coin trading is fun, but then there's also the other stuff.
I mentioned at the beginning, I love the look and feel and the tone that you guys are taking with it feels very user friendly. Just the colors, the rounded edges, and even the name Milky Way. What what were some of what's the thinking behind rather than coming up with a highly technical, overly complicated name like most Web3 people do, you came up with something fun.
Yes. I'm not gonna take credit because I did not come up with the name. But then for the name, it's very Cosmos actually in that sense. It's liquid staking. Our first product line was liquid staking, right? Second product line is restaking. So it's like, what is liquid, in the Cosmos cellular space? And then so it's like, oh, the Milky Way, milk is liquid. And so that's how it started. And then it's just like exactly like you said, right? Just a name that's, easy to pronounce, easy to remember. And so we went with that. And then so and then we kind of diverge from like, the stars and whatnot to like cows. Because that we were like, okay, that's actually way more memeable than like just stars, and then also a
Yeah.
lot more fun and expressive, right? And then so like all the milk cartons, all the cows, and all this stuff just evolved, and then like we have a lot of fun, just building stuff. And then so for our designer, or actually the entire team member, right? We've all worked together before. That's something that I'm really personally very happy about, like is like the culture that we've built internally, because like I was product, and then like I shared like I'm product, and then another co-founder is blockchain, and then one is full stack, right? And then we basically looped in all of our ex-colleagues from like marketing community, all the other engineers, and then all the other and the UX designer who have to take full credit in terms of everything that you just mentioned. And so when we're like building, and then it's like back in the days, right? But then except that we decide to do this together, and then just build a culture that we all enjoy, right? And then product lines, they're always a new one, and then you never know, comes and goes, right? But then it's just like we enjoy the process together, and then so it's very fun in terms of like people will throw ideas out, and then it's like for a mascot, like which one is great, and then like vote, and then it's like very equal voting. So I love it. Like it's a really nice and enjoyable. So it's a fruit from all of our labors, really.
That's great. I think that's a blessing when you come up with a really nice motif or extendable theme. You started out with Milky Way, like the stars, like constellations, and then galaxies, and then like milk. I mean, and then there's cows, and like you can extend, and and if you involve the community, which sounds like you guys have, gets everybody involved, and then they take it as part of their identity, and then you have that's how you build a culture. And when I've done my research on the Milky Way community and the culture, and looking at your socials, it's clear that you guys have built a really strong community around not just what you guys are doing, but they feel like they're like part of it. And not just there as mercenaries trying to get some kind of airdrop, but it really feels like you've got people that have been there long term.
Yep.
Is that how you see it?
Yes, 100%. Because it's back to when like how I shared that we launched at a really lucky timing. So we captured a lot of the users from the previous cycle. So those are like, actual users, right? They just, probably haven't done anything in the DeFi landscape for 2 years because of, bear market, just not interested. But then the market picked up, and then so they don't need an education, right? They're just like, ooh, okay, let me access this like, Kepler wallet, this MetaMask wallet that I haven't touched in 2 years, and then they just pick it back right up, right? And then so we have that group of users, but we also obviously have like, new users who weren't there last cycle, and then who just, joined the space. And so yeah, and then when we launched, like, it wasn't that sophisticated compared to right now with, a lot of people are running 100 pots to farm. So yeah, so we built a really genuine community from the get-go, and it's definitely, very lucky on that, and we're very, very grateful to have them along with the ride.
That's cool. I want to switch topics really quick. You mentioned bots and farms and agents. What how is Milky Way, I guess, responding to kind of this new world where agents are now involved in, potentially, managing a wallet and then transactions and then potentially operators or agent operators being able to um, do transactions end to end? What are your thoughts around that?
Well, for me, I think like personally, like sorry, if that person uses it on a benefit them on a personal level, it's like, I don't have time to, handle all of these. And then so I have a bot that, okay, I want to interact with, these 5 protocols. I want to use them, but I just don't have the time. And then so, I run a script, and then the bot does it for me, or etc. Right. And so I think that's really good use case. Obviously, from a founder's perspective, in terms of the community, we would want them to genuinely, participate. But so it really depends on the level of participation, right? And that's also why we also segment our users. Like, there will be ones who are very active, in Discord, helping out others. They find might be a bot as well, but then it's more about their intent, right, in terms of, how they're participating in the community. And then so if so that's how we see it in terms of the genuine level. Yeah, so there will be bots, that run the transactions because, it's purely transaction, they use it, but then there'll be people who are more involved, and just talk a lot and have fun, and, make memes,
Yeah.
and then just like, share.
What about the AI space? I guess when I speak bots, I'm, the what we're calling agents right now, autonomous agents are really just bots.
Yeah.
Um, but there could be a world soon where these agents are autonomous and they think on their own. And how would that in that world, how would they interact with I guess, are you planning from a product perspective, like how do you deal with that kind of world where the user is this autonomous agent?
Yes. Well, a lot of companies are building that already, right? It's like, setting up, right now it's like all the reply guys, they're thinking in terms of like the responses as well. But then there are also ones that, will trade on your behalf. You send them like, whatever money, and then like set these programs with the agents, and then they will, like do the trading and everything. And then the next level of sophistication will, interact with the DeFi protocols. So the thing is, we actually won't be able to differentiate, in the sense that the transaction wasn't, signed by the person, actively clicking, or just, authorizing the bot to do it, or the agent to do it on their behalf, right? So in terms of the on-chain data, it would be hard to spot, and so that's
And
kind
and
of out
almost
of
doesn't really matter, like
it
because you're
doesn't
just
matter
kind of
exactly.
agnostic to the user. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's why we're doing a segmentation between the on-chain users. Very important as well. But then there's also the community who is more, on the talking side, right? Because even right now, without AI, there's still a lot of people who use this, but aren't part of the active community. So it's very two separate user group in that sense.
That makes sense. It's a beginning of 2025, and there's going to be a bunch of events this year. Any plans on attending events and what the community can look forward to?
100%. So yeah, so as per most Web3 companies, we go, quarter by quarter. It's quite hard to see, like, oh, are you going to be at the, event at Q4, right? Because it really depends on how things go. And so, yeah, but we will definitely be at Consensus and at Denver. And we are, thank you for the reminder, we are planning stuff. We need to
Okay,
get to, yes.
good. Anything you'd like to share with the audience before we before ETH Denver, because that's coming up in about a month.
Yes. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Socials, yes.
That sounds good. Well, Josie, this has been really great, and have looked forward to speaking with you. I have good friends that work at Celestia, and they have said really great things about Milky Way and what you guys are doing there, and kind of your product vision and leadership. So kudos to you and the team.
Yeah.
And kudos to you and the team. You guys are doing a great job. Before we get off, any final words you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, thank you very much for your time, for listening, and yeah, thank you again, Peter, for having me. It's great fun.
Awesome. I'm going to put all the contact info in the show notes. That way, anyone that's interested in participating on Milky Way can go there and follow you on Twitter. But thank you. This was great.
Thank you.